Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. The cruelest part wasn't learning my girlfriend, Soraya Voss, had been lying. It was the way she treated my pain like an inconvenience I needed to fold up and hide. We were standing in my St. Louis apartment, the place I built one steady paycheck at a time, and I asked her, quietly, why her stories kept changing. She didn't flinch. No tears. No guilt. She looked at me like I was interrupting her day and said, "Get over it." Then she added, "You are too emotional, and it's embarrassing." My name is Kadeem Rowe. I'm 34, and I work logistics for a medical supply company. My job taught me that most disasters aren't sudden. They're slow patterns people ignore until it's too late. I'm not flashy. I don't raise my voice to win arguments. I believe stability was a form of love. Bills paid on time, meals planned, showing up even when I was tired. Soraya said she loved that about me when we met. Later, she treated that steadiness like a handle she could grip to steer my life. We met during an art walk near Grand Center in St. Louis. Soraya was the kind of woman who made strangers feel like friends in 10 minutes. She spoke with confidence, laughed easily, and asked questions like she was collecting details. I told her I grew up in Memphis and moved for work. She told me she had big plans and needed someone who believed in her. The first few months felt bright. Late dinners, weekend drives, silly inside jokes. She'd rest her head on my shoulder and say, "You feel safe." I thought that meant I mattered. The first warning sign arrived dressed as humor. Soraya borrowed my car for a quick errand and came back hours late, smelling like a cologne I didn't wear. When I asked where she'd been, she laughed like I was doing a comedy routine. "You are imagining things," she said. Then she flipped the script fast. Why was I interrogating her? Why didn't I trust her? Why was I making problems? I apologized for asking. That apology taught her something dangerous. I'd swallow discomfort if it kept the peace. She treated that like permission. Her friends became a constant presence. Lashana Dyer was bold and sharp, the type who could compliment you while cutting you down in the same sentence. Brenner Kit was quieter, always watching, always measuring. They started dropping by my place without notice, calling it Soraya's spot, laughing when I corrected them. They ate my groceries, used my streaming accounts, and joked that I was old-fashioned because I liked planning. Soraya never corrected them. She smiled like it amused her that they pushed me. My apartment slowly stopped feeling like a home and started feeling like a space I funded for other people's comfort. Soraya moved her things in without calling it moving in. Bags that never left, shoes in the entryway, toiletries in my bathroom. She didn't contribute consistently, but she always had money for brunch and beauty appointments. If I asked about splitting bills, she called me petty. If I asked for quiet, she said I was controlling. If I asked for respect, she said I was sensitive. "Get over it" became her favorite phrase because it ended conversations without solving anything. The emotional part was what wore me down. Soraya had a talent for making me feel guilty for having basic expectations. She'd do something hurtful, then act offended I noticed. She'd tell me I was too intense when I asked for honesty. She'd say I was insecure when I asked who was texting her late at night. I started choosing my words carefully, as if I lived around fragile glass. I became quieter, not because I had nothing to say, but because every sentence felt like stepping into a trap she built and called love. Then my mother's health started slipping in Memphis. Doctor visits turned into tests, tests turned into procedures, and my Aunt Yelena's calls grew more urgent. My mother, Wynette, was the strongest person I knew, but strength doesn't stop illness. I began driving down on weekends, sitting in waiting rooms, organizing paperwork, making sure she had groceries and her prescriptions. Soraya performed support when it was visible, one prayers up post, one public handhold. At home, she got colder, like my family emergency was a scheduled inconvenience she wanted me to handle quietly. Work got heavier too. When hospital orders are late, people don't care why. They care that it's fixed. I traveled more, Kansas City, Indianapolis, Louisville, sleeping in hotels, eating quick meals, staying calm while everything pulled at me. Soraya texted pictures of rooftop views and new shoes and smiling friends. She always wrote, "Miss you." But when I called, she sounded distracted. If I asked who she was with, she sighed like I was exhausted. "Friends," she'd say, like curiosity was a flaw and trust meant silence. The first clear crack came from my bank. One night outside Kansas City, I got an alert. A new device logged into my account. The location tag said St. Louis. My stomach dropped. I called Soraya immediately. She answered chewing, like I was interrupting her dinner. When I told her about the alert, she laughed softly. "Get over it," she said, then admitted she logged in because I forget things and she was helping. When I asked why she didn't tell me, her voice hardened. Why was I tracking her? Why didn't I trust her? Why was I so insecure? I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, so I tried to stay calm. But calm doesn't mean blind. My job trained me to look for patterns, so I did what I always do. When something feels off, I check the details. I open my statements and scan line by line. At first, the changes were small. Subscriptions I didn't remember, cash withdrawals that didn't match my habits, little purchases at places I never went. It looked like nothing until I added it up. Then it looked like a steady leak someone was counting on me not to notice. Months earlier, Soraya had offered to organize my finances. She said I was too trusting and life was easier when one person handled the boring stuff. She asked for access to my budgeting app, my email, and a couple of accounts tied to autopay. I agreed because I loved her, because I was tired, and because I believed couples share burdens. Now I checked my account recovery settings and found her email listed as a backup. Her number was attached to a payment app one barely used. She wasn't just helping. She had built herself an access route. I pulled my credit report. There were inquiries I didn't recognize. Not a full crisis yet, but movement, like someone testing how far they could go. I sat at my kitchen table and felt my chest tighten, not with anger first, but with disbelief. I wasn't just dealing with cheating. I was dealing with someone treating my identity like a tool. I started a folder system in my laptop like I do at work, finance, devices, housing, property, communications. I saved alerts, exported histories, and took screenshots with dates. Confrontation would only make her erase things. A storage unit receipt showed up in the trash. Just a small slip with a facility name across town and a unit number. I asked Soraya casually what it was. She didn't hesitate. "Inventory," she said. "For business idea." She had never mentioned a business. The receipt listed my card's last 4 digits. My card. I kept my face neutral, then stepped into the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror until my breathing steadied. In that reflection, I saw a man trying to stay calm while someone quietly dismantled his life. Lashana confirmed more than she meant to. She came over while Soraya was in the shower and started talking about Chicago like it was already decided. "Soraya is going to be so happy there," she said, scrolling her phone. "Fresh start. Better vibe." I asked why Chicago. Lashana smiled without warmth. "More options," she said, then glanced at me like I was slow. "Men who actually match her." The words landed heavy. She said it like my relationship was a joke they told at brunch. Then she looked around my apartment like she was mentally packing it. That night, I checked her shared cloud folder. Most of it was harmless: recipes, furniture screenshots, ticket confirmations. Then I found an attachment Soraya forgot to delete. A lease application for an apartment in Chicago. 2 bedrooms. A rent amount Soraya couldn't cover alone. The co-applicant name was Ronald Baines. I recognized it instantly. Soraya called him a friend from college, the kind of friend she defended too quickly. Seeing his name on that paper felt like a punch that didn't bruise skin but bruised something deeper. My hands went cold on the keyboard. I remembered every time she made me feel foolish for asking about him. I remembered her calling me controlling when I asked why she texted him after midnight. She never denied the closeness. She justified it. "He understands me," she said once, like that explained betrayal. "You take everything personally." I try to be patient. I try to be steady. Meanwhile, she was building a future with someone else, funded by my work, protected by my silence, and defended by my habit of apologizing for being hurt. That realization hurt more than the idea of cheating. It made me feel used. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there listening to Soraya breathe, thinking about my mother in Memphis and the life I was trying to keep together. In the morning, Soraya kissed my cheek and asked what I wanted for dinner like everything was normal. The casualness was almost cruel. I wanted to throw the lease in her face. I wanted to demand answers. But my job taught me that when a system is compromised, you isolate the breach first. So I stayed quiet and planned. Not revenge. Protection. The kind of planning that doesn't require yelling. I opened a new bank account at a different institution. I rerouted my direct deposit. I changed every password from a device Soraya never touched. Banking, email, payment apps, cloud storage. I enabled two-factor authentication and removed her recovery contacts. I froze my credit with every bureau and turned on alerts for inquiries. When Soraya asked why a streaming service stopped working, I shrugged and suggested she log in again. She tried and failed, then stared at me like I broke a rule she thought she wrote. I saw annoyance flash in her eyes. No worry, no guilt, only frustration. Then I handled housing. My lease was in my name. Soraya had been pushing to get added officially, and I always delayed. Now I understood that instinct was a warning. I went to the leasing office, renewed early, requested new locks, and updated gate codes. The manager, Ms. Telfair, processed the changes without asking for gossip. When I returned upstairs, Soraya tested the door and frowned. "Did you change something?" she asked. I told her the building had upgraded security. She rolled her eyes, annoyed she couldn't move as freely in a space she didn't respect. The worst part was the weekends in Memphis. I'd sit beside my mother while she dozed, listening to machines and hallway footsteps. My Aunt Yelena would whisper about lab results and medication schedules. I couldn't bring Soraya's betrayal into that room. My mother had enough to carry. So I smiled, held hands, and told my mother I was doing fine. Then I'd drive back to St. Louis with my throat tight and my eyes burning, feeling like I was living two lives. One where I was strong for my family, and one where I was silently being dismantled. Soraya escalated when she sensed the ground shifting. She started asking questions about my schedule in a new tone, like she was mapping my movements. She asked when my next Memphis trip was. She asked if my work travel was changing. She was collecting details again, but not for closeness, for timing. Lashana and Brenner stopped by more often. They'd look around my apartment like inspectors, their eyes lingering on electronics and boxes I kept for storage. It hit me then, they weren't just rude. They were part of the plan. Soraya didn't want peace. She wanted an exit that benefited her. The final move came on a Wednesday I will never forget. I walked into my building and smelled cardboard and packing tape in the hallway. It's a specific smell, moving, leaving, taking. When I reached my door, it was unlocked. I didn't rush in. I stood still and listened. Then I stepped inside. My living room was half empty. My TV was gone. My console was gone. My work laptop was gone. Even my suitcase, the one I used for Memphis, was missing. The wall looked naked where my screen used to be, like a tooth knocked out clean. Soraya stood in the doorway with her coat on, phone in hand, expression calm, like she was finishing an errand. Behind her, near the elevator, Ronald held one of my bags like it belonged to him. He looked at me with a smirk that tried to be intimidating. Soraya spoke first. "I'm leaving," she said. "Do not make it weird." I asked where my things were going. She rolled her eyes. "You'll be fine," she said. "You always land on your feet." I asked why she was taking my property. She tilted her head and smiled like my question was childish. "Get over it," she said again. Something in me went cold and clear. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't raise my voice. I just said I already did. Soraya blinked, confused for a second. "What does that even mean?" she snapped. I pulled out my phone and opened the evidence folder I'd built. I showed the bank alert. New device login, time-stamped, location tagged. I showed the storage unit receipt paid with my card. I showed the Chicago lease application with Ronald's name. Soraya's face stayed hard, but her eyes flickered once, just enough to reveal she understood she'd been seen. Then she scoffed like the truth was an insult. "You will not do anything," Soraya said. "You never do anything." It wasn't just a jab. It was a prediction based on how she'd trained me to respond. She thought my comment, I'd always protect her from consequences. Ronald shifted, trying to look bigger than the situation. Lashana's voice echoed in my head. Options, Chicago. Men who match her. I realized Soraya didn't think she was stealing. She thought she was collecting what she deserved. That entitlement is a strange kind of cruelty because it doesn't need anger. It just needs you to stay quiet. I turned and walked past them without touching anyone. I went straight to the front office and told Ms. Telfair my property had been taken without permission and I needed camera footage. My hands were steady, but my chest felt bruised. She started the process immediately. A police officer arrived, Officer DeSoto, calm and professional. He asked what was missing, who had access, and when I last saw items. I gave serial numbers because I keep them for insurance and work compliance. I emailed screenshots of alerts and the lease application while he stood there. Documenting in real time felt like the only way to keep my emotions from swallowing me. After the officer left, I went back upstairs to my half-empty living room and sat on the floor. That's when the pain hit. Not a dramatic collapse, just a deep ache that spread through my chest and into my throat. I stared at the blank wall where my TV used to be and realized grief can look like emptiness. I thought about how I'd bought that TV after a promotion, proud of myself. I thought about how my work laptop held years of careful effort. I thought about my suitcase because Memphis wasn't just a place I visited. Memphis was family. Soraya didn't steal objects only. She stole pieces of my stability. Soraya texted that night. Not an apology. An accusation. "Why are you doing this?" she wrote. "We were together. It is not stealing." Then, "You are bitter because you left." I stared at the messages and felt something settle in me. She didn't just lack remorse. She lacked reality. She believed relationships were a license to take, and my love was supposed to cover her consequences. She kept typing, calling me petty, weak, dramatic, controlling. I saved every message. I didn't respond. I learned silence can be strength when someone weaponizes every word you offer. 2 days later, Officer DeSoto called. A patrol unit stopped a car near a storage facility for a minor traffic violation. In the back seat, in plain view, was a laptop with my employer's asset tag. The serial number matched my report. The officer asked if I wanted to pursue charges. For a split second, my old reflex tried to protect Soraya, because that's what quiet men do when they've been trained to keep things under control. Then I remembered her face when she said, "Get over it." I remember my empty living room. I said, "Yes." My voice didn't shake. The part of me that used to apologize for being hurt finally stopped. The chain started snapping into place fast after that. The patrol officer asked Ronald where the laptop came from. He claimed it was his. The officer ran the serial number anyway. It came back flagged. Then the officer asked about other items stacked in the car. Boxed electronics, a console, a suitcase. Ronald's story broke. The storage unit paperwork listed Soraya's name. The payment trail showed my card. Building footage showed Soraya carrying boxes out of my apartment, Brenner holding a door, Lashana hovering like a supervisor. It wasn't one mistake. It was an operation. And operations fail when the paper trail is strong. Soraya called me from an unknown number that evening. Her voice was sharp and shaking, not from regret, but from panic. "Fix this," she demanded. "Tell them it was a misunderstanding." She didn't ask how I was. She didn't admit she was wrong. She spoke like I still belonged to her. I held the phone away from my ear, stunned by the audacity. When she paused to breathe, I said calmly, "Get over it." Then I ended the call. My hands shook afterward, not from guilt, but because cutting a cord you once wrapped around your life still leaves a mark. Lashana tried next. She showed up outside my building entrance and blocked my path like she owned the sidewalk. She told me I was doing too much and that Soraya deserved what she took because she put up with me. I asked what Soraya had put up with. Lashana's face tightened. "Your moods," she said. "Your insecurity." I looked at her steadily and replied, "You mean my boundaries?" Lashana leaned closer, trying to intimidate me with volume. "You will regret this," she warned. I stepped around her and said, "Tell Soraya the era of me cleaning up her choices is over." Brenner reached out through a mutual acquaintance, pretending he wanted to keep things peaceful. That phrasing made me laugh without humor. Peace had never been their goal. Control had been. Brenner claimed he didn't know Soraya was stealing. I asked why he had the gate code and why he carried boxes on camera. He said Soraya told him. I agreed. I told him that was a lie. He went quiet, then tried a softer angle, saying Soraya was stressed and needed help. I realized even then he was protecting her image, not my reality. I ended the conversation. I was done negotiating my own truth. The Chicago lease unraveled quietly. A rental agent called because my address history was listed and my credit had been pinged before I froze it. The agent asked if I was aware of the application. I told the truth. I did not authorize it, and I had an active police report involving theft and identity misuse. The agent went silent, then thanked me and said they would note the file. Soraya never mentioned that call. She kept acting like Chicago was waiting. But dreams built on theft collapse when the foundation gets inspected. That was karma in a realistic form. Doors closing because the paperwork refused to lie. My employer got involved because of the laptop. The device contained routing information and hospital delivery records. Nothing glamorous, but enough to matter. They didn't blame me for being stolen from. They tightened access, issued a replacement, and reminded me to document everything. My supervisor, Mr. Halvers, asked if I needed time off. I expected judgment and got concerned. People take advantage of calm men, he said. Do not let it make you bitter. I didn't tell him the full emotional story, but his words stayed with me. Calm is not a weakness. It is discipline, and discipline doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. The legal process wasn't dramatic like television. It was paperwork, hearings, waiting rooms, and the slow weight of accountability. In a St. Louis courtroom, Soraya sat upright with her face blank, like she was attending a meeting she didn't respect. Ronald sat beside her, jaw tight, irritated he got caught in a plan he didn't fully control. The prosecutor presented evidence: footage, serial numbers, bank trails, text messages. Soraya's attorney tried to frame it as a relationship dispute. The judge asked direct questions. Soraya showed no remorse, not even when the facts were undeniable. Watching that stripped away my last excuse for her. When the judge ordered restitution and outlined consequences, Soraya's expression barely changed. That was the moment I accepted she wasn't sorry. She was angry she stopped. Ronald muttered under his breath, embarrassed. Soraya adjusted her hair like the ruling was an inconvenient noise. I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. The court didn't give me revenge. It gave me a clean line between what happened and what she tried to call it. Truth, backed by documents, is a kind of closure you can build on. I walked out of that courthouse feeling bruised, but no longer confused. I got most of my property back, but not all of it. Some items were damaged. Some were missing entirely. The TV screen had a crack. My suitcase was scraped and stained. Small things that mattered, tools, an old watch from my father, never returned. That loss hit differently because it proved Soraya handled my history with carelessness. I replaced what I could slowly. I filed insurance claims. I updated my inventory lists. I learned that when someone stops seeing you as a person, they stop caring what they destroy on their way out. That realization hurt, but it also freed me from wanting her to understand. She never planned to. Through all of it, my mother kept fighting her own battle in Memphis. Some weekends she was stronger, sitting up and laughing softly. Other weekends she slept for hours, and my Aunt Yelena and I spoke in whispers about lab results. I kept Soraya out of that hospital room, but the betrayal followed me like a shadow. On the drive back to St. Louis, I'd grip the steering wheel and feel tears rise without warning. I wasn't only grieving Soraya. I was grieving the version of myself that believed love alone could protect me from harm. I was grieving the patience I gave away like it had no value. The loneliness after Soraya was louder than I expected. Not because I missed her, but because I missed the idea of coming home to someone who was on my side. My apartment felt too quiet. Silence makes room for memories, and memories can be cruel. I replayed moments where I ignored red flags to keep peace. I remembered how she laughed when I said I was worried. I remembered Lashana treating my home like a stage and Brenner watching like a guard. Some nights I couldn't sleep, not from fear, but from anger at myself for being trained to accept disrespect and call it commitment. I rebuilt my routines the way I build shipment plans. Step by step, consistent, measurable. I cooked again, simple meals that felt like care. I cleaned on Sundays and played music without worrying who would criticize it. I went to the gym early and let the treadmill burn off adrenaline that had nowhere to go. I tightened digital security, set account alerts, and created systems where no one could quietly reach into my life again. None of it was glamorous. It was private. It was the slow work of rebuilding trust in myself, because that's what Soraya really damaged, my belief that I was allowed to notice what I noticed. Soraya tried to regain control through small invasions. New email addresses, new numbers, messages sent through mutual contacts. She claimed she missed the good times, then blamed me when I didn't respond. Once, she showed up near my office like it was an accident. She smiled like we were still connected. I nodded politely and kept walking. That rejection made her angry. She sent long messages about how I'd never find someone like her, how I was stuck, how I was too soft. Still no apology. Just another attempt to shrink me back into the role she preferred. The most chilling part was her certainty that I would return. Ronald's confidence cracked first. He began posting vague complaints online about people setting men up, trying to rewrite his role. Soraya didn't defend him. She never defended anyone but herself. When he became inconvenient, he became disposable. A mutual acquaintance later told me they argued loudly outside a bus station, both blaming the other. That wasn't love. It was a partnership built on taking, and when taking became hard, they turned on each other. Hearing it didn't make me happy. It just made me grateful I wasn't trapped in their cycle anymore. The karma didn't come as a dramatic explosion. It came as a chain reaction, quiet, realistic, and sudden once it started. Court dates interfered with Soraya's work schedule. She missed shifts, argued with supervisors, and blamed everyone else. Her hours got cut, then she was let go. She posted about unfair bosses and protecting peace, but never mentioned the truth. Her credit took a hit. The Chicago lease evaporated. Friends got tired of her borrowing money and bringing conflict into every room. Karma didn't shout. It removed the safety net she assumed would always be there. And the coldest part was that she still didn't learn. She just got angrier. Restitution came slowly. Not enough to change my life, but enough to symbolize accountability. Each payment arrived without a note, without a message, without a human acknowledgement. Compliance, forced by rules, not conscience. I didn't watch her struggle with pleasure. I watched it from a distance. Her life was no longer my responsibility. That distance was a relief. I didn't have to interpret her moods or translate disrespect into excuses. I just kept moving forward, one practical decision at a time, like rebuilding after a storm you didn't invite and no longer have to host. My promotion arrived quietly. Mr. Halvers recommended me for a role overseeing regional routing, better pay, better hours, more trust. The company valued my documentation habits and calmness under pressure. I didn't post it. I didn't announce it. I celebrated by taking my mother to dinner in Memphis on a day she felt strong enough to sit up and smile. Watching her laugh was better than any public victory. Success didn't need an audience. It needed stability, and that was something I knew how to build. The private part mattered because Soraya always wanted her life to look impressive. I wanted mine to be safe. Healing wasn't straight. Some days I felt light, like I could breathe again. Other days, a phrase would hit my ear, "Get over it," and heat would rise behind my eyes. I learned to sit with those feelings without letting them drive the car. I started writing at night. Lessons, boundaries, reminders. Love doesn't require shrinking. Respect isn't negotiable. Proof protects peace. Those sentences weren't for anyone else. They were for the future version of me that might be tempted to confuse loneliness with permission to accept mistreatment again. My pain became a teacher, but I refused to let it become my identity. In spring, I looked around my apartment and realized it felt different. Not because the furniture changed, but because I had changed. The air felt lighter without constant criticism living in it. I boxed up the last of Soraya's remaining items, things I'd kept sealed as evidence, and carried them out without ceremony. I didn't throw them away in anger. I threw them away like you throw away something expired, something that used to be useful, but now only poisons what it touches. I replaced small things slowly. A new TV, a lockbox for documents, a better desk setup. Each purchase felt like reclaiming ground. Soraya tried one last time through a softer door. She emailed a long message about how she never meant for things to go that far. It was the closest she came to admitting fault, and even then she wrote like events happened to her, not like choices came from her hands. She said she felt trapped, that she needed to survive, that she deserved more. She never said she hurt me. She ended by asking if we could talk privately and leave the past behind. Reading it, I felt fatigue more than anger. Some messages aren't apologies. They're fishing lines, hoping you bite and pull yourself back into water you almost drowned in. I didn't respond. Months passed. The silence held. No new numbers. No surprise appearances. It was as if she finally accepted that the door was locked and she did not have the key. I spent time with people who respected me. Coworkers who showed up, family who loved without conditions. I went to a bookstore and bought novels again, something I stopped because Soraya mocked anything that didn't serve her excitement. I started learning what peace sounds like when nobody is trying to drown it out. It sounded like quiet mornings, balanced budgets, and the steady comfort of not being braced for the next insult. I ran into Lashana at a grocery store. She looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from living in conflict. She stared at me like she expected me to look broken. When she realized I looked calm, her face turned irritated. "You really did all that," she said, half accusing, half amazed. I nodded. "I did what I had to," I replied. She muttered that Soraya said I ruined her life. I looked at Lashana steadily and said, "Soraya ruined Soraya?" Lashana opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then closed it. For the first time, she had no joke. I never asked for updates about Soraya, but news travels. I heard she fell out with friends because she borrowed money and didn't repay it. I heard she tried to move anyway, but couldn't get approved without a co-signer, and nobody trusted her enough to sign. I heard she blamed her ex for everything, as if I controlled the consequences of her choices. None of it made me gloat. It reinforced a lesson I learned too late. Entitlement doesn't disappear because you love harder. It grows because it's being fed. Soraya didn't want partnership. She wanted access. The biggest twist, the one that proved how deep her entitlement ran, came a year later from my credit monitoring app. It flagged an attempted inquiry, someone trying to open an account using my information. It was blocked because my credit was still frozen. The location was St. Louis. The name attached was Soraya's. Even after court, even after restitution, even after everything, she tried to reach into my life like it was an unattended drawer. I forwarded the alert to the agencies, updated my reports, and informed Officer DeSoto. That was karma too. The system I built after her kept working, protecting me quietly while she kept repeating the same mistakes. That night, I sat in my living room and thought about what it meant in Soraya's mouth. It meant, stop making me accountable. It meant, don't inconvenience my comfort. It meant, swallow your pain so I can keep talking. When I said it back to her, I meant something different. I meant, I'm done negotiating my dignity. I meant, you don't get to rewrite reality. I meant, you don't get access to me. The phrase didn't become a weapon. It became a boundary. And boundaries aren't loud. They're consistent. And consistency is what creates safety. I kept my success private on purpose. I didn't want a life that depended on people watching. I increased my savings, moved money into long-term plans, and kept my credit frozen until I felt fully secure again. I took a modest weekend trip to Charleston, walked by the water, and ate good food without checking my phone every 5 minutes. I started thinking about buying a home, not to prove anything, but to build something lasting. I volunteered quietly once a month, not as an identity, but as a habit. Peace isn't a mood. It's a system you build, choice by choice, until your life becomes harder to invade. The last time I saw Soraya was from a distance across a courthouse parking lot. She was talking animatedly to someone, hands moving, face sharp, convinced she was the victim of other people's choices. For a second, old anger tried to rise, but it couldn't find traction. I felt detached, like watching a storm from inside a sturdy building. I got into my car and drove away without looking back. That was my real win. Not that she struggled, not that she lost, but her presence no longer had the power to move anything inside me. I used to think closure came from an apology. I used to think if I explained my pain clearly enough, Soraya would finally understand and feel something human. But some people understand you perfectly and still choose themselves over your safety. Closure came when I accepted that. Closure came when I stopped waiting for remorse and started building protection. It came when I realized that love is not proven by endurance. Love is proven by care, respect, and consistency, things Soraya never offered. I didn't win because she got punished. I won because I stopped letting her write the rules of my life. If you're reading this because someone you love told you to get over it while they were hurting you, hear me. Getting over it doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means choosing yourself with actions. It means documenting truth when someone rewrites reality. It means locking doors you used to leave open out of love. It means recognizing when your kindness is being used as a resource. Soraya never apologized. She never showed remorse. She never changed. But she didn't have to for my life to improve. I got over her by removing her access, protecting my future, and rebuilding my peace in private, quietly, completely, and for good. If this story gave you chills, hit subscribe, because the next one is even more ruthless. And share this with someone who keeps explaining disrespect instead of setting boundaries. New stories posted regularly. Don't miss the next twist. Today, my life is not flashy. It's stable. It's clean. It's mine. I still travel for work, still call Memphis every day, still show up for my mother with patience. I no longer waste on people who don't value it. I'm careful with who I let close, not because I'm bitter, but because I learned how expensive trust can be when you give it to someone who thinks love is a loophole. Soraya taught me what entitlement looks like. I taught myself what boundaries look like. And the difference between those two lessons is the difference between surviving and living.